Tuesday, August 9th, 2002 work study meeting. If we could stand up and say the Pledge of Allegiance. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, next we will have a roll call, please.
Director Asner?
Here.
Director Byers?
Here.
Director Faulkner?
Here.
Director Hudson? Director Moeller?
Here.
Vice President Petroff?
Here.
And President Cunha?
Here.
All right, so we have a quorum. Before we start our monthly SSD board meeting education work study, I would like to take a moment to remind the audience and directors of the board on the work study process. The work study is a time to receive information from SSD leaders. We have 20 minutes set aside for each presentation and 20 minutes for the board to ask questions. If, in the event we are approaching the 20-minute marker, I will alert the group there's 5 minutes left. We ask that at that time the presenter finish up in the allotted time, and the board director asking questions to finalize their questions. This is in respect of all the board of directors and the SSD leadership team. All right, first on our agenda, point 2.4. No. First day. 2.01. Strategic plan and CSIP plan action plan.
Good evening, Vice President Petroff, Board of Directors, Dr. Keenan. My name is Molly Wilson, and I am the Executive Director of Teaching, Learning, and Accountability. And tonight I'm going to present to you our strategic plan and our comprehensive school improvement plan action plan. Slide, please. Slide, please. So just as a reminder of this graphic that you guys saw with our strategic plan document, the difference between the strategic plan and the CSIP plan. So remembering that the strategic plan focuses more on the organization as a whole, where the CSIP plan is more mission focused and focused more on our instructional side. Next slide, please. So we'll start with the strategic plan. Next slide. So goal 1 is really looking at strategic database systems that help us to equitably support both instruction and operations. And Dr. Jeff Haug is the goal champion for this. We have 2 strategies under that goal. The first one focusing on developing our administrator skills for making sure they're improving efficiency and effectiveness. And then our second strategy is really developing that internal capacity for utilizing data. Next slide, please. So what you see here, and you'll see this a common theme throughout these, and I know they're small, and I'll summarize it for you. But these come from the series of change that we've done on each strategy, and what these tell us are kind of the action steps that are going to be utilized this year, what the output of those action steps are, as well as the expected change we would want to see based on those. For strategy 1.1 and 1.2, we have one team working on those simultaneously because they do overlap quite a bit. And what you're going to see here is we're really going to be focused on developing a set of questions to really look at important data sets. So developing those questions so that we're asking those really data-based decisions and making sure we have the right data to answer those questions. We're also going to be looking at a data governance system, and that's really looking at making sure we have the data we need available, looking at the integrity of that data, as well as the security of that data. So that's what that data governance system would focus on. And then really increasing our partnerships around student data with our partner districts and being able to share that data both from our side and their side. This is something we've been working on for years, and we're finally, I feel like, making some good headway that we'll be able to have a system in order to utilize that.
That goal, I know, apologize for interrupting. I was trying to follow through. I didn't know what this meant.
Okay.
Inclusion, exclusion criteria for historical data.
So really looking at, so we are very data rich in our district. And so really looking at those important questions that we want to answer, and then being able to say we want to include this data set because that will be important to making these decisions.
The reason why sometimes when I hear inclusion and exclusion, I think about it, so I was trying to figure out which one.
Okay, yeah, no problem. Next slide, please. So our goal 2 in our strategic plan is really looking at optimizing the resources and ensuring that they are equitably distributed to help support our students. Wendy Pendergrass is the goal champion for this one, and we have 2 strategies. The first one being identifying our resources, and the second being then developing that process to determine a good distribution of those resources. Slide, please. So you'll see both of these strategies indicated on this same theory of change, with the first boxes going across representing identifying the resources, and then the next 2 boxes identifying the distribution of those resources. So we really want to ensure that our departments are utilizing best practices when they're utilizing those resources and identifying what they need, and then making sure that they're equitably distributed. So that's really the focus of this strategy. Goal 3 is really looking at communication strategies and making sure we have 2-way communication across all of our stakeholder groups. We know we're usually pretty good about one-way communication, but we really want that 2-way so that we're getting that back and forth. So Jennifer Henry is our goal champion for this one. And you can see they focus around establishing relationships with the community as well as our family engagement, and then establishing those communication systems amongst our departments at all levels of the organization. So this first one is really focused on public awareness and making sure we are working hard for that public awareness so that people know about us and know what we do. And then the second piece is really looking at collaboration tools that we can use to really identify the needs of not only our staff, but our students and families, and to better meet those needs. And then the last being, as we develop partnerships, having an onboarding process and a recognition process for those partnerships as we develop those. Slide, please. Point 2 is really focused on our family engagement. And you might remember our creation of FACE. At July 1, we started that, where we collaborated with, we pulled together PETA, Parent Education Diversity and Awareness, and our Family Engagement Initiative to create FACE. And so what we're working on here is continuing to build the capacity of our families, our staff, and our students to increase those partnerships and really develop that family awareness that having those strong partnerships really does impact student achievement. And then lastly, just really looking at opportunities for our staff and families to engage and collaborate around those students. Slide, please. 3.3 is really focused on our cross-communication strategies within our district and all levels of staff. So really looking at building each department's identity so that folks know who they are and what they do, and then identifying with each department what their informational needs might be, and then being able to then develop those cross-communication strategies so that we're effectively communicating the work we're doing. Thank you. So that ends our action plans on the strategic plan. Next, we'll move into our CSIP, or our Continuous School Improvement Plan, and the goal champion for that is Wendy Pendergrass. So as we look at goal 1, proactively planning for student success, we do have 3 strategies under here. The first is really thinking about post-secondary and making sure we're preparing our students for successful post-secondary. Our next is improving connections between student data as well as that proactive planning piece. And then the last strategy for the school is engaging in our collaboration with our partner districts. I think. As we look at 1.1, that's our post-secondary, we're really looking at defining from a special school district's perspective, what is a positive post-secondary outcome. We do have those definitions from DESE, but they're very limited, and they don't always capture the success that our students do have post-secondary. So we really want to define what that looks like. We also really want to focus on long-range planning and work on that long-range planning at a younger rate. So starting in elementary school, thinking about that long-range planning for those students so that we're not waiting until they're in high school to try to figure out where they're going to go next. And then lastly, really helping develop not only our students, but also our families and our staff skills to engage in that long-range planning. Slide, please. So for 1.2, we're looking at those outcomes. So determining the factors that it takes for those successful outcomes for our students, and then engaging with our partner districts and looking at some of those early warning signs and intervening earlier to help our students be more successful, and then making sure we're having those data-based decisions and making those decisions based on multiple sources of data, not just one data point. Next slide, please. And 1.2 and 1.3 kind of go hand in hand, because 1.3 is where we're really talking about continuing that collaboration and that planning with our partner districts, and integrating that data that we found so important in 1.2 into our work processes as we work on our partnership agreements and continue our partnerships with the partners. Slide, please. Moving on to goal 2, this is where we're working on our decision making to make sure the supports that we are providing is in alignment with our mission. And so we have 2 strategies under there. The first being developing a shared understanding purpose or philosophy, if you will, of how programming decisions are made. And then the second is making sure that the decisions we do make are grounded in that evidence-based practice. As we look at 2.1, next slide. We'll be looking at working on our programming philosophy. So really developing that from a district's point of view, and then being able to communicate that out, do some professional learning around that, as well as the best practices that are associated with that, and making sure we have that accountability within our district. Next slide. 2.2 really gets at utilizing those tools that we've developed a lot of, and identifying and utilizing those evidence-based practices that we know bring us the best results for our students. We're also looking at providing some guidance and some research around core programs that we can then share out with our partner districts to ensure that universal instruction that all students receive is that evidence-based instruction, and also support students who may have learning differences. And then being able to match student profiles with the best programs and strategies based on the evidence. Moving on to goal 3, which is our last goal of the CSIP plan. This is where we're really looking at those students who have a high mobility and may be experiencing a lot of school changes. With special school districts being throughout all of St. Louis County, we have the benefit of kind of leveling the playing field, if you will, for our students if they are highly mobile, because we have data that we can track them and hopefully pick up their instructional programs quickly no matter where they move in the county. So this particular goal, if you could go ahead and go to the next slide, is really trying to determine that current state and really working with some of our highly mobile districts and understanding the experiences of the staff in a highly mobile district as well as the students and the families. And we'll achieve that through actually doing some stakeholder interviews and then really trying to tease out what are the needs of those families, those staff to better support them, as well as those students, so we can ensure some continuity across services. And then finally, to develop strategies to help support that. Slide, please. Now I'll open it up for any questions you might have.
I'd like to go back, if I may, to the goal 3 and reference 3.1, and establishing relationships with businesses, agencies, and other community stakeholders. What methodologies are we looking to put in place in doing that?
Are you on 3 with the strategic plan, the public awareness, the collaboration tools?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I'm sorry, repeat your question.
What methodologies are we looking to do that? It says that we're going to establish relationships with business agencies and other community stakeholders that will support student success. So that's goal 3, create a multi-channel communication strategy. So what does that strategy look like?
Yes, so some of those strategies as listed in the next box over is we're really looking at developing an onboarding process when we do enter into a partnership to really explain what special school district is and the services we provide, and then get the same from that partner that we're coming to, so that we make sure our collaboration is strong and it's centered around our mission and our vision for our students. And then really looking at, those partnerships that we have are successful, replicating some of those pieces that are very successful in other partnerships that we see. Those are just a couple. They'll be exploring more strategies as well. Those are the couple that they came up with in their action plan to start with.
So, as I said, I'm not fully understanding in reference to if we in fact have little relationship, if that's the case, or don't have the kind of relationship we're looking to build, what kind of methods are we going to put forth in doing that? Because we've got to unless we get people, then our intentions at that point in time don't count. So I would assume that there have to be some specific methodology that we're looking to use to get to that point of having individuals to establish relationships with. And that was my question I was asking. I may have missed in your response.
So you're looking at how do we seek out partnerships as opposed to once we have them, how we're developing them.
Right. How are you going to get the people in the first place?
And I think that's something that this team will be kind of looking at. I do think that with a lot of the partnerships we already have, when you look at, for example, our tech schools, we're looking at those industry partnerships that our graduates might feed into. And oftentimes those folks are hungry for partnerships because, needing those employees once they graduate. When you look at some of our business partnerships, we would be looking at what are those needs we have, and then being able then to seek out folks who might be able to meet that need and establish partnerships. Would be just some ideas. I'm sure the team will probably come up with many. And if you have some ideas, we would love to hear them.
Yeah, that's because even going to the faith portion of the next page and gaining that engagement.
Absolutely.
Then we have to have some ideas to how we're going to do it. I mean, whatever we've done, if we're in fact undertaking this now, is because whatever we've done thus far has not gotten us to where we have those particular relationships.
I think we do have a lot of strong relationships. I think we're just looking at how to continue to, within the community. If you look at some of the partnerships and MOUs that we currently have, we do have some very strong relationships currently. However, we're always looking for new opportunities, and things that may, in fact, align with our mission and vision and support our students and families even more, which we want to access. A couple of the newest ones that we have is we just entered into an MOU with the Higher Education Consortium and also with Capital, and they're actually coming to our family hub to meet our families at North Tech and our family hub and offer services to our families right there on campus. So, and those organizations also have other strong partnerships that we'll be able to leverage based on those.
I'd like to be informed when we have those so I could attend.
Absolutely. So they are setting up a regular schedule up at our family hub. I'll make sure you have that.
Dr. Gold, thank you for this presentation. This is very thoughtfully prepared. I think I have it in mind, I have the lens of strategic planning and CSIP in mind, seems very distinct, clear now. I'm curious now, going forward, as you pick up on a trend, if there are problems that emerge, your data reveals, attendance issues or slide and reading, math scores, whatever it may be, what's your thought process? Like, through which lens do you look at the issue first? How do you decide to divide your energy between the lenses on a particular issue that emerges?
So that's the great thing about these plans is our action plans, we will revisit them every year. And as our data and our results show us things, then we're able to then hone in on some of those things the following year or even potentially within that year if needed. And so I think, a lot of those results will be reported back to you guys quarterly, as well as, as we start seeing trends and patterns, then we're able to better focus in and address those specific.
My understanding that the CSIP lens is examined first, or through that lens that look at issues first, and then the strategic planning is more loftier or
high
more
level.
distant. Gotcha.
Yes.
Question.
Sure.
This is on the continuity of care aspect.
Yes.
My guess is from what you had presented before, and with this presentation on strategy 3.1, my guess is the number of moves the child makes is inversely proportional to his performance. More moves, the greater the chance things get screwed up. And that makes sense. You would lose teachers, you'd lose continuity. You'd have to start over and make friends. You're always a new kid on the block. All right. My question on that would be, has that ever been conveyed to the parents? I know it's like one of those things like, well, everybody knows it. But then I thought, maybe they don't. Maybe people don't think of that at that time.
And they may not.
And I was wondering, and just a suggestion, is there a way that we could send that to the pack? I mean, that might be a way to get that information out. It would be nice to know that every time you transfer, either at a school break, at a semester break, or, God, that's really nice at the end of the year. And because I know we talked about, it would be nice to have the same teacher throughout. It would be nice when we have the students move, so it's not always just the teacher that has to be there. The students are going from school to school, which is out of our control. I was wondering, and I know many times people move because they just have to move. But I was wondering, what if we talk to parents and say, we understand people have to move, and we will provide services no matter where you go. But at the same time, it would be better for your kid to wait till the end of the semester. And this was done by maybe presenting it to the PAC, letting the PAC carry our water, put this out.
Absolutely, I can take that.
I don't know, it was just an idea,
No, I think,
because I keep hearing that same thing come up.
Yeah. And there are several indicators that indicate, at risk. And so I think it would be great to present that to the PAC and see if it's.
I know the PAC wants to get the problem.
Absolutely.
It seems okay, but one of the things that push.
I have one final thing, probably said it. In a few of these slides, one of them says PL, like the PL for administrators, PD for everybody. PD is professional development. What is PL?
Professional learning. And PD can also be partner districts, so we tend to use PL more than PD, so we don't get confused. It's those acronym things. And it's a little small space, and that's why they put the acronyms in there. I apologize.
No, that's
We try to
okay.
be really mindful of that, but professional learning, because a lot of times we use, in SSD, we do use PD for partner districts, so we try to keep it.
All right, I learned something new. All right, any other questions?
Yes.
Go.
Question and a or not a question, a comment and a request, relating to strategy 1.1 of the CSIP on slide 15, which had to do with the long-term outcomes. The request is, could we actually have a more detailed presentation to the board about what components we're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. They actually are going through the SRS process, and they are to the implementation phase of their design right now. And so they're coming to our DLT next week to kind of present where they are. And so I think that could be a great presentation.
I think it would be just very both appropriate and interesting to hear how we're doing this. And the comment is that I've been hearing from parents from several different schools. I know it's happening in Norwood, and the concern is that we do a good job of helping the kids who are high functioning, and we do a good job of helping the kids who have substantial developmental needs. The kids who are sort of in the middle, who are, the medical terms I would use would be borderline intellectual functioning, so kid with autism, borderline intellectual function, and they seem to kind of, especially in high school, not have programming that's meeting their developmental needs. And so that would be something to think about, and I'd be curious if it could be addressed as part of that.
Sure.
Thank you.
Pass that along.
And that would probably be the largest percentage of individuals.
Well, it sort of depends. It depends on what school. So, for example, I think in our SSD schools, I think the kids really
a lot, but in our partner schools, that would still be our highest.
Yeah, and if they're in a classroom with combined levels of needs, they might be watching the Minions movie. But these are not kids who want to watch Minions, right? They have, and so they sort of feel like they're being left out. But at the same time, it's not always appropriate to have them be in general ed, setting all the time. So that's sort of the question. I think this speaks to those long-term expectations, because if they're in that classroom, they may not think, for example, what direction am I going to be going after?
Right. And that's the thing we really want to get at is, what is the student's long-term goals, and are what we doing in our programming helping us to get there? And that's some of the tools and things that they're developing. I think you would really enjoy that.
I'm really looking forward to hearing that. Yeah.
Any other questions? Thank you so much. Next on our list, 2.02, academic and equity focus for schools.
Good evening, Vice President Potroff, Board of Directors, Dr. Keenan. My name is Kelly Grigsby. I'm the Executive Director for Schools and Programs.
Kevin Andrew, Executive Director of Career and Technical Education and College and Career Readiness.
Okay. Tonight we're here to give you an update on the academic and equity focuses, general focuses in our schools. We welcome staff back today. So our principals are just now having an opportunity to meet with staff regarding specific goals, but this will give you an overview of where we're headed, the direction we're in. Next slide, please. Ackerman School, next slide. Ackerman, remember, is our K-8 school serving our North County districts. Their goals for this year really are going to center around high-quality instruction. You're going to see a lot of general themes throughout this presentation. We have a lot of similar focus as we're schools, so that's not atypical. In addition, growing the use of restorative practices. So remember, restorative practices is repairing harm, community circles, building that community in classrooms and in the school, in hopes of decreasing suspensions and other behavioral incidents. Partnering also with FACE, which is the acronym for Family and Community Engagement, because we're continuing to try to improve our family engagements at Ackerman, families that are linked to learning. So we're not just bringing families in for a social event, but we're really trying to pair social with academic events across our district. Next slide, please. Equity focus for the 22-23 school year continues to be really just an overall commitment to equitable practices, really working to surface those practices and areas that we need to be paying closer attention to regarding issues of equity, focusing again on family relationships and engagement, and then also continuing to have thoughtful, actionable conversations with staff about equitable practices. So really those conversations surface where we need to spend our time and energy, in addition to the data that we're looking at as well. Next slide, please. Northview. Remember, Northview School is our high school that serves our North County School District. They are also concerned with high-quality instruction and access for students, but they're also continuing to grow community partnerships and also growing relationships with families. So when you think about Northview, you're talking about continuing to have access to community-based instruction sites, also partnering with post-secondary agencies, Urban League, other places that can come in and support our students. Continuing to focus on high expectations and rigor. We've had a lot of reliance on technology over the last 2 years because of the situation that we're in, and technology is great, but we also need to get back to direct instruction and really focusing in on explicit instruction through that teacher-student relationship face-to-face. And then restorative practices is also a focus for Northview. Next slide, please. This is kind of a word cloud that really captures what they're focused on as their equity team. Their equity team is very established. They've been working hard to make sure that they are focusing on both students, staff, and really addressing all of those needs. And they will continue to hone in on that as they come back together. They meet with their equity team during this next couple weeks. Next slide, please. Litzsinger School is the elementary school serving our central corridor. Litzsinger is also concerned on increasing our achievement scores in reading and math, really expanding their fidelity with regards to restorative practices. So they've had some initial training for staff over the last 2 years. They really want to dig into that and continue to grow those practices, and then also broaden opportunities for student and family engagement. Next slide, please. We also borrow that horse. It doesn't permanently stay with Litzsinger, so don't worry about that.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're concerned. Okay, no worries. With regards to our equity focus at Litzsinger, again, we're going to train all of the new staff, get them to the place where we are currently, and continue to grow restorative practices. Continue to look at behavioral data and really use that to make decisions about next steps. And then continue to build community where staff feel heard and seen, welcomed, and accepted. Next slide, please. Neuwoehner High School is our central corridor high school, so serving our district and our central corridor. Also, they are concerned with increasing reading and math performance, making sure that we have student and family voice captured in the post-secondary learning experience, but remember that we are also implementing charting the life course, so that will help naturally address that. And then reestablishing our community partnerships. So some of our agencies, businesses that we have partnered with in the past were not comfortable with us coming in to do community-based instruction, so we're really reestablishing those, coming back and getting back into the community for our students. We're always focused on increasing the time that students are in class, and that means decreasing office referrals or support room calls. Again, restorative practices, examining behavioral data. These schools must be working together, right? Relationship building, and then also making sure that we are really directly teaching social emotional learning skills. Next slide, please. Southview School is the school that serves K through 21 years of age in our south part of the district. Their priorities continue to include building restorative practices, capacity for staff and students, increasing student attendance. We really are focused on trying to get our attendance levels back up, getting kids used to coming back to school, and making sure that we're making the most out of that. Increasing student reading and math scores, and then also increasing student stamina. When we talk about stamina, we talk about the level of time, or the amount of time a student can focus on a task, stay engaged in a task, whether that be academic, social, or a work task. Next slide, please. Their equity focus at Southview is really integrating their equity work with the family engagement. So they're going to put those teams, they're really going to focus on events and initiatives that support one another, being intentional about representation, and then focusing on student-staff relationships while we're also working on connecting with families. Next slide, please. Bridges. Next slide, please. Bridges is really with their new building that we should be able to welcome students into in the next couple of weeks. It's beautiful. If you haven't had an opportunity to see it, it's amazing. Really going to expand that middle school programming options for our students who really need that full day experience. Going to add some community-based instruction to work on soft skills and those more employability skills for our students that are need those skills. Focus on reading and math, improving instruction, also increasing academic expectations, so managing the behavioral piece with the academic piece, and exploring opportunities for family engagement within their new buildings. Next slide, please. We are going to continue at Bridges to grow and engage the equity team And last year, their focus on equity was really understanding the community, knowing all of the different zip codes that we serve, and the experiences our students have. They come from all over the county. That was done through a bus tour of different areas with a historical perspective. This year, they're going to be focusing on continuing to build that capacity, and also LGBTQIA+ experiences and secondary trust. Also going to be focusing on partnering with families. Next slide, please. The courts program. So remember, the courts program includes the Juvenile Detention Center and Lakeside Center. Really important, most of the students that we see at JDC and Lakeside are students who are in high school. Really going to focus on helping them and ensuring that they're earning credits towards graduation and increase performance in the areas of reading and math. Oftentimes we see some good growth from those students even in the short time they're there because the interventions are so concentrated where they haven't had that level of attendance or engagement in their home schools. Next slide, please. The course program has an extensive plan that is put into place to address the climate and culture. We're really excited of the 3-year plan that we have in place there. That includes the entire staff. Really going to look through considering perspective training, equity, skill development, respectful communication, all the things that go into making a high-quality school culture for staff and students. Next slide.
All right, so North Technical High School, you want to go next slide? So for goals for this year for North Technical High School, this is the last year that they will have a full day program. We've got 34 full day seniors that will be graduating this year, and then after that, we're moving to fully half day. So their priority is kind of reimagining what the identity of the building is. So just focusing on some of that mission and vision work for the building, knowing that they're kind of changing identities from a combination half day and full day program to solely a half day program. Through that, that's going to focus on curriculum, student work keys, TSAs and IRCs, so industry recognized credentials, career and technical student organizations, and again, building partnerships, and all that feeds into improving the career technical education programs that we offer. Next slide. As far as the equity focus for the 2022-2023 school year, North Tech, again, is kind of including equity as a part of their Reimagine North Tech component. Within that, the equity team for North Tech is also the school leadership team. So as opposed to having 2 separate groups working on moving the school forward, it's all centralized in one group with teachers and staff representing all departments and areas at North Tech. They're going to have monthly meetings, as well as they're going to be incorporating some mindfulness training with their staff as a way to improve staff mental health and allow them to be a little more reflective. And then build common language and building expectations in teaching and learning and having that be through an equity lens and meeting students where they are. Next slide. South Technical High School, go to the next slide. So South Tech's goals for the 2022-2023 school year, we have a focus on our Generation Z students, which is the population we serve now. That includes student community engagement. So now that things are getting back to more normal, getting students out into the community that's in our career and technical student organizations, that in internship opportunities, and really having them be ambassadors of the school, and creation of equity goals through inclusion, so an equity focus on student outcomes. And then re-engaging in building South Tech, the things that we had going before everything happened with COVID, getting all of that back up and running. So that's developed community building committees. There were a lot of committees that were tabled, bringing those back to focus on specific need areas, and focusing on having specific advisory groups to ensure that we're getting all the community input that we need. So students, families, we already have partner districts, and making sure that we're hearing from all those voices and stakeholder groups. And then technical program development and programming. South Tech last year piloted a tool for program development for any of our technical programs that are looking to really focus on improving outcomes. This is an optional process that programs can go through, but it really helps map out where are you trying to take the program, what's the next step for that program, and push them to higher levels of student outcomes. So right now it's being done on a voluntary basis, but there are some programs based off previous year's data where they're going to be going to that program as well, and then focusing on logistics and always process improvement. Next slide. And then their equity focus for the 2022-2023 school year. At our equity retreat we had this summer with all SSD schools and programs. You have there at the top is South Tech's equity team purpose that they established this summer. And then their goals. So South Tech is really taking a building-wide approach, and so having optional opportunities for staff to engage in equity work. That includes a monthly lunch and learn series with Dr. Macklin's staff coming in, providing professional learning opportunities. The building leadership team will analyze building processes on a monthly basis through an equity lens. And then their equity team is going to examine learning and teaching spaces and doing some audits of their environment of how do we make sure this is an inclusive learning environment. And then South Tech staff will perform coworker observations so they can really see best practices. One of the challenges that we have is what we do is often unique, and so being able to get a chance, especially both in building as well as out building, see how other people are teaching the same content area. So having South Tech teachers travel north, North Tech teachers travel south, to be able to do some observation. But, questions?
Dr. Brisby, you mentioned earlier in your presentation about us attempting to get back kids after COVID. What does that look like in reference to a percentage loss or amount?
I don't have exact numbers on the percentage loss or amount. I can run attendance numbers for last year compared to the year before and the year before that, so I can give you some 3-year trend on attendance data. But we had students that missed because of quarantines, because of having COVID, because they were quarantined because people had COVID in the school, people had COVID in the family. So we have a learning loss for students. That's one of the reasons why we introduced our summer programming for students. We had some students take advantage of that, but we are very interested in getting families comfortable with sending their students back to school and really considering our quarantine practices so we can keep students engaged.
Because I'd like to know that students usually, oftentimes, mimic their parents. And I know that in other particular industries, parents are using COVID even when it's not necessarily a situation to be utilized that way as far as taking time off. So I'm curious as to whether or not we've got kids who are crying COVID that might not necessarily have COVID, but they see that that's a way for them to not necessarily have to come to school.
I don't know that that's the case or not. I do know that it's our responsibility to engage students in learning. So we need to figure out how to re-engage students, how to make learning fun, how to rebuild relationships, and how to encourage students to, that needs to be the best place for them to be. So whether it be through finding their strengths, finding activities they enjoy, building that in, but it's our obligation to make sure that we are enticing students back to school. And also, I think with our Link to Learning activities, we're really showing families that we want to get back to learning and we need their support, and we need them to buy into sending kids back to school. We may need to partner, and we'll continue to partner with outside agencies, also mental health supports, to make sure that students feel comfortable. I mean, this is they've been through a lot, families have been through a lot, people have been through a lot. So as much as we can do to support them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Final presentation, 2.03, the recommendation for a lead administrative assistant position.
Good evening, Vice President Foster, Board of Directors, Dr. Keenan. I'm Philip Boyd, and I'm the new Chief People and Culture Officer for Special School District. And today I will be talking with you about a position recommendation for lead administrative assistant. Next slide, please. So what the purpose of this is to talk about some things that become recognized around training and support of new administrative assistants in the district. Next slide, please. Currently, we have approximately 140 administrative assistants. About 1/3 of those have started or been hired within the last 5 years. Next slide, please. What we've also seen with the data through surveys is that we've had declined engagement amongst our administrative assistants, and also feeling that the training that they have received hasn't really prepared them to be successful in their role. Next slide, please. Additionally, we've seen an uptick in turnover over the last 2 years with our administrative assistants. Next slide. Currently, our administrative assistants are responsible for diverse roles, and they have diverse training needs as a result. And if we can address some of those training needs and some of the support, we believe that we can also impact employee satisfaction, engagement, as well as success. Next slide, please. So currently, we don't have established programming for administrative assistants. And we did have a position in the district, but that position was cut about 10 years ago. Next slide, please. Currently, what we think we should do is we want to make sure that we're filling the identified systems gaps around training and processes, and making sure that we have an understanding about established processes and departmental roles, and making sure that we're very much differentiating around those needs. Next slide. When we think about this potential position, we would like to have an administrative assistant lead that will have ongoing training responsibilities. It will be a hybrid position, as thought initially, where they would have current full-time administrative assistant position duties. Sorry about that. And we would assess the feasibility of it continuing to be a hybrid position as we move on. This first initial year, though, there would be more of that responsibility around making sure that we're properly onboarding the newest administrative assistants coming into the district. Next slide, please. What you'll have in front of you is an example of what would be the job requirements, where we would ask the person to collect, review, analyze information, provide administrative support, making sure that they are being responsive to training needs, and plan and schedule work and direct staff as needed. Next slide, please. Other potential opportunities for this position would be the possibility of helping to screen in HR, creating an academy structure for administrative assistants, as well as making sure that we have differentiated training based upon experience and role in the district. Next slide. Can I answer any questions?
How long would you expect this position to be there?
I think as part of our effort,
You're not talking a forever position. My understanding is that this position will train and then eventually move on.
I think that what we would like to do would be to assess the effectiveness of that over time. I think we would approach this as we would any kind of program in terms of having an evaluation process for it. So year to year, we would see, are we making sure that we're impacting engagement and satisfaction, but also making sure that we're creating a pathway for success for all of our administrative assistants. I definitely want to reverse the trend on the turnover that we've seen over the last 2 years, and I think a position like this can be very impactful in that regard.
I have a question. So they would report to HR, like who's above that? Would they fall under HR or would they fall under, who's their fault?
Well, it's gonna be, since it's a hybrid, so it's like they still will have their administrative duties that they have, and on top of it, they'll be doing these other pieces, so it's gonna be, they report to their main position, and then their boss, and then they will also have a dotted line to working with the Office of Employee Success and Engagement.
Seems like people have a lot to do, at least the first year.
Well, I think the first year will be building it out. I think the reason they cut it 10 years ago is because it was not deemed as enough work for a full-time position. And so what we want to do is to see what's the feasibility with having this as a lead position at a management level, to look at to see building these pieces. It's not going to be built over, like in the next couple months. It's going to be building it throughout this process. When you see the trends, it's been about 10 new staff members each year, so that's going to be much more of looking at the feasibility. But this next 2 years would be building it up to determine, what is needed long term. So it's tacking it to an existing position, but it's also saying long term what's feasible, what's workable. What we don't want to get into is another, well, it's not a bid position that requires a full-time position, so then therefore it gets cut. So thinking about that management level and how to manage those pieces.
It seems like the responsibility to begin with, to create each manual for the accounting, the HR, that. Have we thought about, budget for this position?
Currently, when we look at the market basis for lead administrative assistants, salaries are typically in the high 60s and 70s.
Do we have any input from our administrative assistants about what sort of support they would be interested in having?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Do we have any input from our administrative assistants about what sort of supports they're looking for or would like to see?
We've had some initial surveys. We've actually been working with Matt Trauber and Carla Reichert on creating a new survey to really get deep on what administrative assistants are needing, both in terms of the programming and the software platforms, but also around some of the soft skills too, you know, when we're talking about customer service and being able to be responsive. So we will be sending out that survey as well, because whoever comes into this position, we want to make sure they're set up for success, and so that we can collaborate on trying to create those kind of learning platforms as we move forward.
Any other questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, so Karen, this is my birthday. Do we need a motion?
Yes.
Yeah, all right. Could I have a motion, please?
Yes, motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay.
No.
No, do I? I don't want to agree.